Imagine you're the greatest general alive. You've never lost a battle, not once. Armies that outnumber you fall apart when they see you coming. Kings fear your name. Historians compare you to Alexander the Great. And then you lose everything. Not because someone finally beat you on the battlefield, but because of something far more interesting than that. This is the story of Pyrrhus of Epirus, the man who gave us one of the most important phrases in the English language and probably never knew it. And by the end of this, I think you're going to look at your own wins a little differently. Let's set the scene. We're in ancient Greece around 300 BC. Alexander the Great has just died. No heir, no plan. And his empire is basically a pie being carved up by his generals. It's chaos. It's opportunity. And into this world steps Pyrrhus. He's a king of a small kingdom called Epirus, tucked into the northwest of Greece, not Rome, not Athens, not Macedon. Epirus. Nobody's really afraid of Epirus. But Pyrrhus? Pyrrhus is different. From a young age, the guy is just built for war. He's physically imposing, tactically brilliant, and here's the thing people don't talk about enough. Genuinely loved by his soldiers. Not feared, loved. They followed him not because they had to, but because being near Pyrrhus made them feel like they were a part of something bigger. Hannibal, yes, that Hannibal, was one of the greatest military minds in history. Was once asked who was the greatest general of all time was, he said Alexander first, Pyrrhus second, himself third. Let that sink in. Hannibal put Pyrrhus above himself. So we're not talking about a footnote in history. We're talking about one of the most gifted military commanders who ever lived. And yet most people have never heard of him. Why? Here's where the story really starts. Around 280 BC, a Greek city in southern Italy called Tarentum is having a bad time. Rome is expanding aggressively, and Tarentum is directly in its path. They need help, so they do what any desperate Greek city does. They call someone else to come fight their war for them. They call Pyrrhus. And Pyrrhus says yes. Why? Partly to help, partly because he's ambitious, and partly because honestly, Pyrrhus just liked fighting. He was good at it. It's what he did. He arrives in Italy with around 25,000 soldiers and something that the Romans had never seen before. War elephants, big ones. The Romans called them Lucanian oxen because they had no words for the elephant yet. They didn't know what they were looking at. The first battle is at Heraclea. Rome sends a massive army. Pyrrhus lines up his forces, unleashes the elephants, and the Romans predictably completely fall apart. Pyrrhus wins. The second battle at Asculum is even bigger. Rome comes with more men, better prepared. 2 days of brutal fighting, and Pyrrhus wins again. 2 battles, 2 Roman armies, 0 defeats. By any measure, the campaign is going brilliantly. And then a Roman ambassador comes to negotiate, and Pyrrhus says something that should have been his first warning sign to himself. He looks at his own army, battered, depleted, exhausted, and reportedly says, "If we win one more victory against the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined. One more victory, and he will be ruined." Think about that sentence for a second. Here's the thing about Pyrrhus' victories that highlights don't show you. Yes, he won at Heraclea, but he lost 4,000 of his best men. Men he couldn't replace because he was fighting far from home. Yes, he won Asculum, but he lost another 3,500 soldiers and several of his most trusted officers. Rome, meanwhile, just kept sending more legions. Rome had the population, Rome had the infrastructure, Rome could absorb losses that would cripple anyone else. Pyrrhus was winning every single engagement and slowly bleeding out. It's like being in a fight where every punch you land costs you twice as much as it costs your opponent. You look like you're winning, the scoreboard says you're winning, but you're the one who's going to collapse first. This is what we now call a Pyrrhic victory, a win that costs more than it's worth. And here's where it gets philosophically interesting, because this isn't just a military problem. This is a human problem. How many times do we chase a win, a promotion, an argument, a goal, and get it, but at the cost we didn't bother to calculate? We wanted the outcome so badly that we never stopped to ask, what am I actually giving up to get here? Pyrrhus was so good at winning battles that he never developed the habit of asking whether those battles were worth winning. After the Italian campaign stalls, Pyrrhus doesn't go home and rest. He can't sit still. He pivots to Sicily to fight a different war against Carthage. More victories, more brilliant tactics, more exhausted soldiers, wondering when they get to go home. He comes back to Italy for one more shot at Rome, the Battle of Beneventum at 275 BC. And this time, finally, he loses. Rome has figured out how to counter the elephants. Pyrrhus retreats back to Greece with a fraction of the army he arrived with. And then, rather than consolidating, Rather than building, rather than resting, he immediately throws himself into another conflict. Macedonia, the Peloponnese, more campaigns, more wars, he can't stop. He dies in 272 BC, not on a grand battlefield, not in some epic final stand. He's fighting in the streets of Argos, a city-to-city skirmish, and according to the historian Plutarch, he's killed when a woman on a rooftop drops a roof tile on his head. A roof tile. The greatest general of his age, the man Hannibal idolized, ends in a street brawl with a tile dropped by someone's mother protecting her son. There's something almost poetic about that, and something deeply sad. So what do we actually take from Pyrrhus? He wasn't a failure, let's be clear about that. The man was extraordinary. His tactics are still studied in military academies. His instincts on a battlefield were almost supernatural. But Pyrrhus confused excellence at the game with winning the game itself. He was so focused on the next battle, the next conquest, the next victory, that he never once stopped to define what success actually looked like for him. What was the finish line? What would enough feel like? He never asked, so he never found it. And this is the part that I think applies to all of us, because we live in a world that is obsessed with winning, with metrics, with milestones, with more. And there's nothing wrong with that ambition. Ambition is what gets things built, what drives people forward. Ambition without direction and motion isn't the same as progress. The real question isn't, can I win? Here's proved you can win and win, and still end up with nothing. The real question is, what am I winning towards? What does the life I'm building actually look like when I get there? And is the cost I'm paying right now worth what I'll find on the other side? Those are harder questions than, how do I beat the Romans? But they're the ones that really matter. Pyrrhus of Epirus won almost every battle he ever fought. He died in the street, forgotten by most of history, with no empire, no legacy, and no peace. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because he never stopped long enough to figure out what good enough would feel like. There's a line from Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, that I keep going back to when I think about Pyrrhus. He wrote, "It is not that I am brave enough to face death. It is that I have lived in a way that makes it easy to let go." Pyrrhus never let himself live that way. Maybe the most important victory any of us can chase isn't on the battlefield, or a balance sheet, or a scoreboard. Maybe it's just the feeling, quiet and honest, that what you're doing actually means something to you. What I'm trying to say is that winning isn't always plain to see. It can sometimes be a rough, difficult challenge, or it can be a simple observation. But make sure, quote unquote, winning looks like the way you'd want to win. A way you can look back at and be glad that you truly won. Till then, see you around.